What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Better Than We Thought podcast, where we talk about how our relationship with God, each other, and just life in general is so much better than we thought, all because of the gospel. Last week, you did not say that, and I am grieved in heart and in spirit.
I started to try, didn't I? But then I was like, I don't know what the intro is.
I was brokenhearted because for the first time in the history of our podcast, we did not have our signature intro.
Well, it sounds like you need to be on every episode then.
Not gonna lie, it was nice having a break.
Yeah? I thought you were going to say it was nice listening to my podcast, but no.
Oh my goodness.
Have you listened to it?
Part of it. I know the big themes.
That's not enough.
Yo, why are you exposing me on national television?
It's not national television. I bet we got like 2 whole people watching.
Yo, we got like 4, okay?
Tim, my dad.
Don't forget about Jake and Shelby, okay?
Jake and Shelby. I don't know if they've watched the last few episodes. My mom.
Oh no, are they
Becky
sleeping on
probably.
this too?
That's probably it.
Well, at least we got 5. If you're also listening, comment in the chat just for our self-esteem and confidence.
And Jake and Shelby, if you're listening, you have to put it in there so we can see who.
Yeah, seriously.
If you actually are. Just kidding.
Because if you aren't, yeah, this may be our last episode, but you need to move away from the mic. Yeah, what did you think about last week?
I don't know. I can't really say anything because I'm not supposed to be by the mic. Is this close enough?
Yeah, it is.
It's like in a really strange position.
No, that's a great...
It feels like I need to be like closer to you.
No, yeah. I mean,
no?
I mean...
I'm doing much better this week because I have my coffee that I made at home that's in a fancy coffee cup that I saved from the coffee shop so that it feels like I have coffee from a coffee shop.
There we go. Sorry, I
You're
keep
like,
fixing
could you
your
move
mic.
away, please?
No, that's perfect. Yeah, you are good at that. And it really confused me when you would take home coffee cups, but I get it now. It does change the feel when it feels like you bought it. It
does. And then I was just telling him, ice is a big part of having a good coffee, like having the good ice. So I bought a $1.18 bag of, yeah, I can hear it in there. It's really
What's
cool.
that thing called? The DSMR, the relaxing sound? For you listeners out there, this is for you. Listen to that ice. Jangle, jingle, jangle.
Wow. Anyway, as I was saying, I bought a bag of ice from Walmart, and I look like a crazy crime person with my knife stabbing it to get the pieces loose. Now I'm smacking the mic.
I apologize to everybody's ears.
And I then have what feels like real coffee shop ice. And I learned today how to use our espresso machine that somebody gave us for our wedding. Because since our wedding, I've been depending on you to make me coffee if I don't drink cold brew, which most of the time I do. And the last couple of days you were busy and you forgot. And I greatly suffered the loss of caffeine, which motivated me to figure out how to use it myself. So that was very smart of you. And
Independence.
So I actually made myself a coffee today.
I'm very proud of you. This is a big step forward. In adulting.
You don't act like I'm not independent because you made your lunch. Yeah.
Touche.
Okay.
There's just some things that shouldn't be said on the podcast.
I agree, but I don't think that was one of them.
No, I'm just kidding. At the end of the day, most of the time, it just comes out, which is what... Okay. That's what season 2 is all about, okay? It's just about being... be real with it. Babe, we need to rescue this. Can you please do not go into a laughing fit right now. Can you please...
I'm desperately trying not to spit my coffee out all over the set.
Okay.
The set, like we are on national television.
Whoa.
Okay.
Can you actually please save the people from this episode and share what we're actually talking about today.
Can you do that? Because I'm going to start laughing. I was laughing in the prayer before we even hit record.
But here's the thing. I need to be reminded,
You don't know what the episode's about.
I have a general idea, but you're the one that came up with this theme.
Okay. Give me a second. Well, how are you doing? Why don't you answer that first, and then I'll do that.
How am I doing? Yeah, I'm... Whew, that's always a deep question. Welcome to the life of a 4 on the Enneagram.
I'm not laughing at how you're doing. I'm just
You're just...
composing myself.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm doing pretty good. I'm not even that tired today. There's just like a lot in my mind, a lot in my heart. So it actually feels really good to just be able to record this and just be here with you and be able to talk about something we're both passionate about, because it feels like a really fun distraction from like all this serious stuff that I've been thinking about all the time.
Doing season 2 a little less serious is actually fun.
Well, it's therapeutic.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'd say I'm a solid like 6 out of 10 today. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Obviously there's a lot, but I don't want to take the episode and make it about my feelings, because that'd be a whole episode. If y'all don't know about the Enneagram, look it up. But anyway, but please.
Okay, I'm composed now.
Redirect us.
Yeah, I got you.
In the ways
don't say
that
something
are narrow.
Funny. Don't say something funny,
okay,
because
it
will make me lose my...
All right, I'll stop.
Okay, so I think in this episode we haven't really discussed it a ton, but we're talking about like the different roles of husband and wives in collaboration and working together, and like I was gonna say biblical headship. Or what is not biblical headship would probably be more.
Look, when we use trigger words, we get more views, so go for it.
We should name this episode, Is Headship Biblical?
Because, well, for context, like, you've searched stuff about, submission and stuff like that.
Yeah, you see my history on YouTube.
Yeah, I do. And you also see mine. I'm sorry for ruining your algorithm.
Yeah, thank you. It's all pickleball now.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
At certain times of the day.
But you've started watching my coffee shop background videos.
I have. You've converted me.
So I've also ruined you.
It feels really nice to feel like I'm in a city. But anyway, that's for...
So you watch a city on... Okay.
Anyway, but for context, you were looking up like submission videos.
That was a few months ago, but yeah.
And research. Well, but I feel like that's kind of the... some of the origin of where this came from was you were searching for that, and what does it look to be a biblical woman? What is a biblical marriage in terms of how the decisions go? And you weren't finding stuff you really liked.
I wasn't finding really anything. That was the thing. I was like, it's such a taboo topic. And I do believe that as a Christian woman, you, in God's plan, are intended to submit to your husband. I know that in and of itself is a very controversial statement. Maybe not with our viewer base. I don't know. The world at large, definitely, but maybe not in our circles. But I grew up with very much the headship theology of well, do you want to explain that a little bit? You tend to be better at explaining theology.
I think you got this one.
Oh, dang it. I was trying to get out of that.
Well, because I want to hear what headship meant to you. Because there's like the general, but what did it mean to you?
I mean, I think it was pretty standard headship theology of the father is, or the man is in charge of his wife and tells his wife what to do, and he tells his kids what to do, and they have to all obey him. Which there is some of that in the Bible, but I think it's a lot more complex than that if you really look at everything. And that model can actually lead to some pretty intense abuse, and abuse of power, spiritual abuse, emotional abuse. I'm sure in some cases physical abuse too. Obviously that's not the biblical standards are leading to that, but the distortion of biblical standards can lead to that pretty easily. It can lead to one person having all the power And we know that it's never really healthy for one human being to have all the power. So, yeah, I definitely grew up with more of that model that, like, the guy makes all the decisions. As the woman, you kind of just need to be quiet and do what he says kind of thing. And so I remember when I met you and when we started dating, it actually really surprised me. I don't know if you remember this, but, like, my default was just to, like, do whatever, like, you wanted to do or ask your opinion and then just do whatever you said. And you would be like, well, what do you think? Or what do you want to do? Or what's your opinion on this? And I was like, well, am I supposed to, like, have one, basically? Not that I didn't have opinions, I did. And obviously on very important things, like biblical things, I, had my own strong opinions. But when it came to, like, what we were going to do for the afternoon, it was like, well, whatever you want to do kind of thing. Or even just, like, I don't know, I don't even remember, to be honest, what the things were that we were talking about back then. Not that it was that long ago, it was only like 2 years ago, but I remember being surprised by the fact that you wanted me to have my own independence and my own opinions. And I had learned to do that as a single woman, but I think I subconsciously thought that when I got in a relationship, I was giving that up. And I was okay with that. But being with you helped me realize, like, wow, that's not actually necessarily what that biblical principle means. And I had already come to the place where I understood that it wasn't, like, I didn't believe in headship theology anymore because I had seen how that could become abusive. But I think there was a lot of that subconsciously in my mind, that I didn't logically believe in that theology, but I subconsciously didn't know how else a relationship was supposed to look. So that was before we got married. So that was kind of the, you hear a lot of people talk about, when they got married, like, it was so hard for the woman to learn to submit to her husband. That actually wasn't my struggle at all. That was pretty natural for me. But when I started looking it up a few months ago, was more that there were times where I felt like I had just blindly done whatever you suggested. And in hindsight, you probably would have liked it if I had, like, I had concerns sometimes, but I didn't really express them. And then later, when I would tell you about them, you were like, man, I really wish you had told me that. Or I wish you would express that as strongly as you felt it. And I was like, oh, shoot. So that's when I started feeling confused. Like, wait, like, what does submission actually mean? Like, should I just, like, obviously, if I feel like a moral conviction, like, if it was a moral thing, I wouldn't just follow your leadership on it. But when it's not a moral thing, I would tend to just, like, yeah, I might say, yeah, I'm not sure about that, but I wouldn't, like, actually really be like, these are the reasons I'm not sure about it. Let's talk about this. Let's think this through a little bit more. And I think I realized that I was actually doing you a disservice, because we're supposed to be in a partnership together, and you wanted me to communicate my thoughts and feelings, and I knew that, but I think I just thought, like, to be a biblical submissive wife, like, I wasn't really supposed to have my own, like, strong opinions about certain things. I don't know. You might be able to sum some of that up a little better. But that's where searching for that in YouTube, that's where that came from.
Yeah, so in Ephesians 5, right, there's that passage where Paul says, wives, submit to your husbands. Or first it says, submit to one another as to Christ, wives to your husbands. And the way that is often in combination with a couple passages in 1 Corinthians. In some church denominations, or even even within the same denomination, there can be different views.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, that idea that
even different cultures is probably different views.
Very much different cultures. Yeah, that the husband's supposed to make the major decisions, all that stuff, and that's kind of how you grew up.
Very much.
And so it was surprising.
My parents have, balanced out a lot on that now, but it also, I think, just contributed that my dad had a more strong personality than my mom. And so, especially with that theology, my dad really was the one that made the decisions. And we believed that was morally his responsibility, and that we were Like, not just did he believe it was morally his responsibility, we all believed it was morally his responsibility to make those decisions. And so, yeah, it was more like kind of a one-man ship, but not because he was saying it had to be, but because we interpreted the verses that way. Because we all believed in this headship theology.
And you're saying that kind of led to an unhealthy dynamic in your home.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's a lot of pressure on the guy, or like on my dad, that like they're supposed to make all the decisions, and then like it can end up unintentionally that the wife is like not really, like, it's almost like, why even think about what your opinion is if it's not gonna be like, not that like my dad didn't think my mom's opinion mattered, but just that whole concept as a whole, that whole headship thing as a whole. It's like, I know for me, I would struggle sometimes to think like, why does it even matter if I have an opinion? Because like, and that was more as a kid, not like as your wife or anything. But that actually is dangerous, because then you're not thinking for yourself. And for me, I didn't really start thinking for myself until I moved out. And then all of a sudden I'm 21 and I've never thought for myself before. And that's a problem. Like, not that I hadn't in some areas, I definitely had, but there was a lot of areas where I was like, I actually have no idea. Like, I don't know, because it was never an option for me to have an opinion in that area, which is not healthy, because then you have to figure that out as an adult, and that's, you know, there's a lot of pre-training that happens.
Yeah, if you're not practicing making independent decisions. Yeah. No, that's, yeah, I think that's representative of, I don't know if it's the majority, I don't know what the percentage is, but I think there's a significant population within the church that kind of does subscribe more to that model.
Yeah. But now in society, there's another model, which I'm also, like, I definitely do not believe in the headship model. I don't think that's what the Bible is actually trying to say, and I've experienced that and the negative effects of that. But I also feel pretty strongly that the opposite, that a lot of people go to, the more feminist movement, is also definitely not biblical. And again, that can spark a lot of controversy, I know, but I really do think that God made men and women to fulfill different roles, and that, you know, the whole, well, a woman can do everything a man can do. Why would you want to? Like, God's given, as a woman, he's given you certain special gifts and talents, and as a man, God's given you certain gifts and talents. You can't get pregnant and have a baby, and there's certain things that you do that, sure, maybe I could do if I really tried, but I wouldn't be able to do them as easily as you would, and I would end up spending all that energy and time focusing on something when God's given me the ability to do something that you actually can't do. You can't get pregnant and have a kid.
Sure. Sure.
Sorry, I'm squealing. That was a squeal, not a cry, though, so I'm good. So, yeah, that whole feminist side of things. And there's also some of that in Christianity. Yeah. Where it's like, you know, you don't need to listen to the men. You know, the women can be in charge. And we're not even talking about, like, women in leadership in the church. That's a whole nother conversation that we're not getting into. But just the role of the woman at home and some of that kind of stuff. And I really do strongly feel that God does have a specific role for a woman and for a man. And that whole feminist movement is not a biblical. Obviously, there's certain parts of it, like, yes, there is oppression on women a lot of times, and God obviously wants, you know, the oppressed to no longer be oppressed, and for us to stand up for the oppressed. So there's obviously a lot of good that's come from it too, but I think that there's also a lot that's not biblical about that mindset. Yeah.
So you're pointing out, like, the two sides of this that seem to be, like, really polar opposite, which is one, okay, women, you know, just submit, don't think for yourselves, do whatever your husband wants to do. And on the other side, it's you don't need your husband, you know.
Don't need a man. No, that whole thing.
And that, besides that, you know, even in the Christian space, that, you know, there's not really roles that God has put for a man or that he's put for a woman. Yeah.
Or almost that it's like looked down on if you want to be, because like, you know, for example, I'm a stay-at-home mom and that's what I want to be.
Sure.
That's pretty looked down on in society and even sometimes in the church. Like, oh, you're just a stay-at-home mom. Like, it's coming to be more of a thing now. There's definitely a whole side of TikTok where it's like the whole stay-at-home mom. I mean, that's my side of TikTok, I guess, that I'm on. But it's becoming more popular depending on the circles you're in. But there still is, you know, a negativity that's often viewed as like, oh, you do his cooking and his cleaning, like, what, are you a slave? It's like, no. Like, but that mindset.
Yeah. So there's some of it, but I think at the end of the day, what you're saying is there's not really a consensus, and there seems in popular culture to not really be a satisfactory answer right now for what it really looks like to be in a godly relationship, what it looks like to honor God as a wife, what it looks like to honor God as a husband, what it looks like to have a biblical marriage. There's just seems
really
to be a lot of
find.
confusion.
Yeah. The only good like resources I found, I'm sure there's more out there, was a podcast that Jackie Hill Perry and her husband did about it that was really good. But I didn't find very much. Yeah.
So that's why we're having this conversation. As we've been thinking about it, have you kind of come to...
Yeah, I feel like, not just me, but I feel like we've talked about it a lot in the last few months. And like, what is the balance? How is this supposed to work? I don't know if you want to share a little bit about like kind of what we've come to.
Yeah, I think for me, like, obviously this is so controversial, and it can be, like I said, it can be confusing, and it's like, you know, it can just get weird really fast, where it's like, okay, you know, we're trying to, on one end, take a couple verses that have a context, you know, about, oh, women can't be in leadership. And it's like, yo, bro, it's like 2025. Like, and again, it's not that we change biblical truth, but
is that really what
the
verses were intending?
Yeah. Isn't there a context? Like, we don't live in Corinth in the first century. There's some principles, and again, this is how you understand the Bible, but if you understand the Bible as being the Word of God with eternal truth, but understanding it responsibly, which, you know, understanding it in a responsible way. I love how Bible Project breaks that down. Essentially understanding it in context. You understand that there's certain things that, okay, were cultural norms then, that don't have to be applied one-to-one.
Right.
Of course, no sexual immorality. Well, that's sexual immorality in the first century. There might be different forms, but at the end of the day, we all know what sexual immorality means. You know, it's just pretty obvious. Anything that's not between a man and a woman in the context of marriage, which Pastor Levi Lesko just gave an incredible series. And you should look it up at Fresh Life Church, February 2025, in case you're listening to this.
Is it a thing?
What?
This time of year, churches do series about
Probably
sex,
it's
because
February.
It's not just Fresh Life. It's Wilkerson's church. He's doing it too, and Robert Madu is doing it too.
Yeah, I think
all at the same
Valentine's
time.
Day.
And Levi and Robert Madu had the exact same sermon title one week.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, it was like one word different, but it was like an adjective that meant the exact same thing.
Oh, cool.
It was so funny because I've seen it in my YouTube, like the things that I follow, and I'm like the two sermons next to each other, and like basically the exact same title. I was like, that's hilarious.
There you go. Yeah. So it, you know, that again, great, awesome series. But so it's pretty clear what sexual immorality is in the scriptures. But when it comes to this thing of like roles and what is a role of a man in a marriage and a woman in a marriage, right? It gets really weird really fast.
Yeah.
But I think something that kind of hit me, that has really simplified it for me, and it's the way that I currently think about it.
Simplified it for me a lot too, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like there's a pretty simple way of thinking about it, which is, again, so I'll go at it at a couple angles. Like, The first angle is biblically. In that verse, before it says, wives, submit to your husbands, it says, submit to one another. And so, and then it also, even after that, it talks about how the husband sacrifices himself for his wife.
Right. So it's a two-way thing.
Exactly. So there is a principle of submitting to one another. In other words, it's not a one-way street of it's just up to you to submit to me. Christ, how did Christ serve the church and love the church? Well, he
laid himself down.
He also washed the disciples' feet. You know, all those different things. Yeah. And so there's a role of leadership in certain areas, but there's also another empowering role where through the Holy Spirit, Jesus is not bodily doing all the ministry. He's empowering the ministry of the church.
Yeah.
And in fact, he hasn't been doing the ministry bodily for 2,000 years. The amount of ministry he did was 33. And the rest of the years of the church has been the church, right? And so that tells you something. And of course, we submit to Christ. But as far as Christ submitting himself and empowering the church, you know, so that's like the biblical kind of idea. But for me, where it's also been simplified, it's just been in leadership principles. Yeah. A good leader is not someone who does everything. Yeah. A good leader is someone who empowers people. My favorite leadership model is laid out in Jim Collins' Good to Great. And he talks about you bring in the right people on your bus. He uses the analogy of a bus. And you put them in the right seats. And that's what leads to the greatest growth, to the greatest effectiveness.
Which is why it matters so much who you marry.
Exactly.
Now, if you're already married, you know, you work with what you have. That sounds terrible. But if you're not married, that's why it matters so much who you date and who you marry.
Yeah, I mean, there's something for us in all stages. There's something for us in all the stages, because on one end it is, okay, who am I bringing
onto my bus?
And who am I joining myself with? On the other end, it's, okay, I've joined myself with this person. How can we best make this work? You know,
people change too.
Exactly. There's something for all of us. But the whole thing is, in light of the best principles of leadership, the way that I currently see this submission, the way that I see the relationship of a man and a woman, is that there are some areas that I lead in, and there's other areas that you lead in. There's some areas that I lead in, that I have strengths in, that I am asking you to, I want your input, but I am asking for you to submit to me in that area, because I've either been trained in that area or I have a strength in that area. And there's other areas that you are more proficient in, that you actually have studied and that you're passionate about, that you're really strong in, that even if I don't fully understand it, I'm going to submit to you in that area. And, you know, the easiest example, and that has been really freeing for me, has been submitting to you in the area of parenthood, where, you know, I haven't really researched a lot of parenthood stuff,
especially when it comes to babies.
Yeah, I haven't really, you know, the specifics of co-sleeping versus, you know, the crib and all that. I'm like, wow, this is so boring. I cannot tell you how boring it is to me. But
we did listen to that one book together, which was pretty foundational, I would say.
But again, that's you exemplifying
that's true. I asked
your
you
leadership.
To listen to the book with me.
Because you, on the other hand, from before you were pregnant, were already thinking about pregnancy. Yeah. Then during pregnancy, we're already coming up with a game plan. You came up with a game plan. I don't understand every aspect of the game plan. I understand the big principles, but every single way that we're raising Ember, I don't fully understand it. Yeah. You know, because I'm not the one that's done that. But I trust your leadership in the area. In many ways, I submit to you in that area of our marriage, in that area of life, where it's like, you know, the two are one. I trust that God has given you wisdom in that area, and if you're telling me that, that we're going to do co-sleep, or you're telling me that, that this is the best way to do this or whatever, unless I have if I have a red flag or I have a concern, I tell you. But other than that, I don't care what a family member says. I don't care what society says. I don't care what culture says. I really don't care what a grandparent says. We are going to go. I'm going to go, and I'm going to publicly support what you say because I trust you in the area. So privately, I may disagree with you, and we can have a discussion and decide what the best way. But like IBM says, like, disagree and commit. And sometimes, I tell you, man, I don't feel good about this.
Well, and that's the other side of that, where I think that it's important.
Yeah.
From my side, to just because, like, you've said that a lot of times, that I'm going to follow your leadership in this area. And I could abuse that very easily and be like, okay, we're doing this, and we're doing this, and we're doing. But when your heart is to love each other, that's not how I want to do it. So, as I'm, doing research on different things, I'll tell you about it. How do you feel about this? What do you think about this? If we're going to set a certain boundary, or if we're going to, obviously there's little things like, okay, what day are we going to start solids? I know you don't really care. Like, not in like a bad way, but like you really don't care whether she has a banana or a squash, or whether she does it next week or this week. It doesn't matter to you. And so I don't say, hey, do you think we should give her this solid or that solid? Or this outfit, or like, obviously. But
that just makes me want to jump off a bridge.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Well, but when it comes to big things, like, we do talk through, are we going to sleep in this certain way, or are we going to do it in this certain way? Or are we going to do a cry it out method, or are we going to do, like, those things we've spent a lot of time talking through. And if we're going to, make a significant parenting choice, then that's not just something that I'm going to be like, hey, we're going to do this. I'm going to say, okay, I did a bunch of research. This is the research. What do you think? How do you feel about this? This is how I feel, but how do you feel about what I'm feeling? Do you have concerns about this? And I think that's really important because it is still a partnership.
It's complementary, I think is the word. And what comes to my mind is, like, in Genesis, a lot of times, and we talked about this, like, a lot of times people think about, Eve was made from the rib of Adam. And so you almost think, like, well, the rib's kind of a small thing. Like, I guess it's not, she's actually not that important. But in seminary, it actually kind of blew my mind where that's actually, in our English Bible, the only time that Hebrew word is translated as rib. That word is usually side. So really, it comes from, and that might sound a little bit technical, or like, what's the big deal? But the whole point is that it's from Adam's side. It's a partnership. It's the word is, the helper is the word ezer, which is the only other, if I remember correctly, the only other time that word is used in terms of who it's used to describe is of the Lord. The Lord is my ezer. He's my helper. And when it says the woman, I will create a helper for him, it's actually, again, it's this word ezer. So it's not this thing of like, hey, take it or leave it, or, just help me in my dreams. Just
cleans his toilets for him, kind of thing.
Exactly, which actually has connotations for really big life decisions. Because as a single person, I had a vision for what my life was going to be. I had a vision for my ambitions and aspirations and all the things that I wanted to do. And in my mind, if I compromised on that, I would be selling out, right?
And you probably would have for your single self.
Sure. But getting married, I want to know, and as we make decisions, I don't believe that it's my responsibility solely to set the vision for our family.
No.
We are two that are one, and whatever I choose is going to affect you so much that I don't feel good. And I really don't believe it's God's purpose and intention for only one person of this equation to be set in the direction. And I just make decisions and I live at everyone else's expense.
Yeah. And that's what can happen. Not like, I don't think anybody intends for that to happen, but it can happen with that headship mindset.
Yeah, that the man is living at everybody else's expense.
Yeah.
Everybody else has to sacrifice because, I want to go make more money, or I want to get this and this, but the decision holistically is not what's best for the family.
Yeah.
And that's where I think I have been a little bit surprised as far as like how much marriage has changed my life plans, has changed what's important to me, has changed what I aspire to.
I think even more than marriage has changed it, honestly, parenting has changed it more.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you felt that shift in the same way until we had Ember.
Yeah.
Because, we were just talking about this yesterday. The kind of career that you would be in, where we would live, stuff like that, we feel like would be different if we were a couple with no kids as opposed to a family, because where you want to raise your kids and how you want to raise your kids is so often important. A different lifestyle. At least for us, it's a different lifestyle than what you and I would
Very
live,
different.
Just if it was just me and you. And so there's that piece too. But yeah.
Yeah, so this part, the way that we see our marriage, the way that we see the roles in this relationship actually have really huge influence in our lives.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's brought me a lot of freedom, is we've been kind of realizing that. Is I think in a couple months ago when I was wrestling with this, I was like, okay, so when it comes to like, let's say money and more like career stuff, because especially it is your career. It's not my career. It affects me, but it like, you're the one working. My, career at this point in life is being a mom. And so, your career choices, money choices, stuff like that. I think I felt like, man, am I supposed to have more opinions about this? And for me, if I'm going to have an opinion, I need to research pretty extensively to have an opinion, because I don't want to just have a random opinion about a big thing. I want to know that it's backed by evidence and by research, and that's just my personality. And so I think as we were looking back at past choices and future things, I was like, am I supposed to have more of an opinion? Especially like when it came to money. Like, I think I handled my money pretty well as a single person, but it's very different when you're in a family. And so, like the finances were never like a huge thing, but like, I never got myself a credit card when I was single. I just kind of just like live paycheck to paycheck, which kind of was just my circumstances. Probably not the best way to live, but anyway. So, the whole money side of things, I was like, I don't feel like I know. Like when we would have conversations about it, like, yes, I know the basic things and basic principles, but when it's like this type of loan or that type of loan, or get out of debt in 2 years or 5 years, it's like, I don't really know. I haven't done the research. But I think what's been freeing about this is to realize, like, okay, like, we both are the kind of people who really like to learn and research. But there's not enough time in the day to research. If you were going to research career stuff, parenting stuff, marriage stuff, cooking and cleaning, the best kind of health for the family, the vitamins that we should be taking, how we're going to homeschool, and then how we're going to do our finances, it's too much. You can't do a deep dive into all of those things. But if you split it up a little bit and you do a deep dive into money, this is just kind of where we've been at right now, and I'm doing a deep dive into parenting stuff. And then obviously we spend a lot of time talking about it, sharing the things that we're learning. So it's not just like, oh, well, you raise the kids and you do the budget kind of thing. There's a lot of conversation and sharing of knowledge. But still, I don't have the comprehension of the finances that you do, because I haven't listened to all the audiobooks and podcasts that you have. And while I share, certain parenting things, you don't necessarily understand all the research behind why we do this or that, as opposed like on smaller things. I think you do for the big things. But I think that that's actually been quite freeing, because it's like, wow, now it feels more like a partnership where we can research and then of course share our opinions. If I have a concern about something that you're mentioning with finances, or you have a concern about something I'm mentioning about Ember's sleep or something, then we can express that concern, we can talk through it, and we can maybe change directions, and we've done that. But at the end of the day, it's not like, I think I started to feel this pressure of like, wait, am I supposed to like know everything about everything? Like when you ask about like money stuff, am I supposed to know everything about that, or about career things? Like maybe I should have a stronger opinion, and how am I supposed to give an educated opinion if I don't know? And like it just kind of got confusing to me. But I think as we've kind of been subconsciously even implementing more this style of, okay, we're going to individually do our research and then talk it through together. And there'll be times when I'll send you a podcast and I'm like, I think you should really listen to this, so that you know where I'm coming from, or vice versa. But in general, I think that's been a really cool shift that's felt like very empowering, I think, to both of us, where it's like, I tell you a lot, like when it comes to career decisions or money decisions, like we'll spend a couple hours talking about it and expressing, our different opinions. And at the end of the day, I'm like, hey, I'm going to support you whichever way, we decide to go on this, and whichever way you feel the most comfortable. And that's often what you tell me about parenting stuff. When it comes to like how we raise Ember spiritually and stuff like that. But, the more nitty gritty day-to-day things.
When there's a lot of different opinions on stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the big thing. There's, family members have opinions. Like I said, society, culture.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many opinions, and there's so many ways of doing things.
So many.
In your finances, in jobs, in
parenting styles, discipline styles.
And all these practical things. I mean, even spirituality, but,
Yeah, that too.
Again, I mean, in that area too, we collaborate.
Yeah, I think that one can't be spirituality is your thing. That has to be your individual. You both have your individual things that you then come together on.
That needs to be the center of both of our lives.
Yeah, I'm going to believe this denomination because you studied it out. Like, that's not.
No, I think that's definitely one area where but again, that's a unity piece, where I think that one definitely is where we have co-leadership.
I agree. But I do believe that at the end of the day, while, like, even with the parenting stuff, while I do, research and I do have really strong opinions about certain things that we talk through, if you were to say, I'm really uncomfortable with this, I've done research for myself, and this is something that I'm really uncomfortable with, I do believe biblically, and this is probably very controversial, that it would be for me to submit to that, unless it was against, like, a biblical principle. Now, your role as a husband is to lead in love, and so if it was just a preference that you have, you're not going to push that preference on me. And so that's where I'm not worried that, like, you're going to be like, oh, I don't want to do this because I don't feel like it, kind of thing. And so then this is what we have to do, because that's not leading in the way that, God wants you to lead either. But yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing you say, like, you believe that at the end of the day, I do have a trump card, or I do have, like, the,
I believe you have the trump card, but I also believe that as you're following God, you're not going to use it unless you're using it for I really feel God is leading us in this direction, but you're not going to use your trump card for your own personal opinion or gain.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know fully how I feel about that. Just because, you know, I think that one can go.
It could probably go either way.
I think they can go either way depending on how you read the scripture. Again, you could justify using that passage and say, okay, at the end of the day, the husband does have that authority. Leaving that there, I don't know if I have to have an opinion on that, but leaving that there, I think, like you said, I think what is in line with God's heart is really not to use that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's not to overpower, and it's not to force my own way, but it's to, yes, can it be that we have some different opinions on something, and I ask you, hey, I'm asking you to trust me on this. I think that's different than this is what we're going to do regardless of what you say.
Well, that's why I said that I think if you did say that, it would be my responsibility to submit, but I don't think, or I know that as if you're following Jesus, which you are, you're never going to put me in that position of, well, you're just going to do it because I tell you to.
Yeah.
That's not the spirit of Christ. And so I never worry about that because I know your heart and I know you're following him. So I don't worry that, you didn't get good sleep last night. And so you're going to be like, okay, we're changing the whole way we're doing things with Ember. And sorry, you got to just do this. You would never do that because that's not the spirit of Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. I think whether it's the way of parenting, whether it's a move, whether it's a job, I mean, there's so many of these big decisions. I think at the end of the day, what we're saying is we are called as husband and wife to work on it together.
Mm-hmm.
And, on some of these practical things, one person can take the lead, other person can take the lead on really big things, coming together, talking it through, coming to a decision that we both feel good about.
Yeah. And I think that that's so empowering because, I know early on when we were married, I think we both stressed a lot about finances because not that it was causing conflict between us, but we were stressed about it and we didn't really know what to do about it. And we weren't sure how to navigate, how are we supposed to be doing this in the right way. Whereas I feel like that's changed a lot and, you've done a lot of research and, we've had a lot more conversations and I think we both feel a lot better about our finances. And also we don't have conflict about them in the way that we used to, where it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what we're going to do. And I don't know, it's different now. And I think that that's in a lot of different areas is because when you feel, I think in the past, when it came to parenting stuff, I was like, well, we have to listen to everything together. Well, how much time do we actually get to listen to a podcast together? Now that we're parents, basically none. And so it's if all the decisions that we're going to make are financial decisions, okay, we're going to listen to the book together. It's not going to happen. It's just not. But if, you go away and you do your research and you do your studying and I'm doing my research and my studying and then we share and compare notes, I don't know. I feel like we're actually making much better educated decisions and we're actually learning and growing in ways that we weren't before when it was well, we're going to do everything together. There's not time for that. And I think that or maybe some people have time, but we don't. I don't think most people do. And so I think that that's part of what it means to be companions and to be helping each other is, we're going to do research. We're going to learn. We're going to, try different things and see how they work. And, yeah, I just think it's a different mindset and it's been really freeing and empowering. And I feel like we've both learned a lot and been able to educate ourselves a lot because we've had a slightly different mindset on it.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, and I feel like I've said that a couple of times, but what we are saying is that biblical manhood, biblical womanhood, biblical marriage is not about the woman being the only one that submits, but it's about mutual submission
and respect.
And mutual submission, mutual respect, and both people submitting to Christ.
Yeah.
And within that, there are, there's some things that, you as a woman are so strong in, and there's other things that as a man that
You're
strong in. And the specifics of that may look different for different marriages.
I was going to say that because, for me, my psychology background and stuff, I find all the psychology, child raising stuff to be fascinating. And I'm not great with numbers. And so I don't really find any interest in the finances other than obviously I know I need to have basic knowledge and stuff. But the in-depth of it all isn't really interesting to me. And you don't particularly find the baby stuff not you love Ember, but all the research behind every little baby thing is not interesting to you. But the financial stuff is more so. And so I think that there's different things that roll out with different families. We had some friends who for a while the dad was having to be the stay-at-home dad just because the wife had a job that brought in more money. And I think that in general it often works better for the mom to have that role, but there's times when the dad has to take on that role, and God gives the strength and the grace for that and the skills for that, and sometimes that's actually what the family needs in that season. And maybe somebody listening is the wife loves the finances. Well, then excel in that area, or I know some girls who love fixing cars. I'm not that girl, but if I was, you would be go for it. Do the research on the car stuff. Be my guest.
I'll trust you with that.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times it's different people's strengths, and how does that, you figure that out in your own marriage, and that's where the whole cookie cutter approach to it can sometimes be not helpful because the same thing isn't going to fit every marriage.
Yeah, I think you just unlocked something for me, which is that at the end of the day, that's the difference between doing marriage under the law and doing marriage in the spirit.
Oh, that's true.
Because it's not saying, here's the new Christian law, woman be the only one to submit, or here's the new Christian law, do it exactly like Ian and Hannah. No, it's led by the Spirit. How is the Spirit leading you to do your marriage? Yeah. Of course, submitting to biblical principles.
Right, but there's
because we're
in the
submitting
Bible
to Christ.
The wife has to cook and the husband has to do the car. What if the husband's a chef and the wife loves cars?
Exactly.
Go for it.
So being led by the Spirit is where we're supposed to live, living in our new identity in Christ, not understanding that, we're not sinners, but that we are sons and daughters of God, that we have been redeemed, that we are new. If we are in Christ, right? And so taking on that identity in Christ, that we're new creations, all those things that we've talked about, applying that to marriage is, I know that you are new in Christ. I know that your heart for me is good. I know that you love me with an undying love. You love me with the love of Christ. And I'm going to trust you. And we're gonna communicate. We're gonna have, open conversations, all that stuff, and that's all important. We can do other episodes about having hard conversations. But when it comes to the different roles and submission and all that stuff, we're gonna submit to one another because we're both submitted to Christ.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that really actually does come down to the trust piece. Because if I didn't trust you and you didn't trust me, then it's this whole thing doesn't work.
No.
Because then you do research on the finances and you bring something to me and I'm oh, well, that's just because you wanted that and or whatever. And then it's it's not going to work. So the whole thing is based on being surrendered to God, living in the freedom of the gospel, and trusting each other. Because if you don't have that peace, then none of it's going to work, honestly.
Yeah, and if someone listening is what is all that stuff about identity? You should listen to season 1 because we talked about it a lot. And we're going to continue to talk about it on this podcast. Yeah. But at the end of the day, yeah, submit to one another, and both of you submit to Christ. I think that practically what we're discovering for us, I think is the right thing. It's led to a lot of peace in our marriage.
Yeah, and our communication.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, in the last 3 months, like, I didn't feel like our communication was bad, but we've talked about a lot of really big topics, and I feel like our communication has gotten so much better about it.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we worked through some of those things of, like, talking about those big things, and, like, it's one thing to talk about, like, big decisions in a theoretical sense, like when you're dating or something, but it's different to talk about it when you're married and you're actually living that out. And it's now like, it's not like, well, in 3 years maybe we'll do this, and now it's like, okay, now we have to make a decision. What are we going to do about this?
100%.
And it's a different thing. And I think it's really cool that we've been able to talk through some of those things, and I do feel like we're much more in alignment now than we were a few months ago, just because of taking the time to talk through those things. And I think when it comes to how do we make decisions, we actually kind of know now how we make decisions, as opposed to, like, I don't know really, like, what are we supposed to do? You know?
Yeah, maybe we'll get into that process a little bit more in another episode. Like I said, like hard conversations.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
Because in many ways, what we're talking about is a fruit of, like you're saying, of trust.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Of which is built through hard conversations. So yeah, there's so much more on this topic, but I think this is good for our part one of what, you know, biblical submission and what biblical marriage can and maybe should look like.
Yeah, and also, like, this is just where God's led us right now. This is just our current, you know, year and a half into marriage view on it. I'm sure things will change a lot. I'm sure we'll see things in different ways, but yeah, we're just talking about where we are right now and what God's taught us so far.
Boom. Thanks for joining us on the Better Than We Thought podcast. If you loved last week's episode with Hannah and Lexi, put it in the comments because then Hannah will do more episodes without me and I can have more breaks.
Yeah, but do you remember how you actually felt after I got home after that episode? You walked in the door and you said it was the cutest thing, actually. You came in the house and you were like, I just want you to know that I never want you to have to work. I want you to always be able to be a stay-at-home mom. Like, we've talked about this many times. I already knew that. And you can do whatever you need to do for self-care for yourself. And I was like, that's really sweet. Where'd that come from? You're like, I spent the last 3 hours taking care of Ember and she was not having a good day. How do you do this every day? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the sweetest comment. I need to do more podcast episodes.
So yeah, maybe don't comment. Anyway, we love you guys and we'll see you on the next episode.